Prominent Alberta lawyer is organizing a delegation to go to Washington, D.C.
Many Albertans and Western Canadians are expressing frustration and anger, feeling used and left out of the decision-making process. Now, the rumblings of Alberta separation are most certainly on the rise.
Alberta is basically treated like a colony of Eastern Canada, and we're sick and tired of it.
Send us your oil and gas money and equalization payments and just shut up. That's basically kind of how we feel, right?
Absolutely. And then when we go to Ottawa to protest the way we're treated, well, what we're proposing to do, first and foremost, is to free Alberta from governance by idiots in Ontario.
You ever see something coming and nobody believes you until it's too late? That's what's happening right now with Alberta. And I need to walk you through exactly how we got here because what just happened isn't getting covered the way it should be. Prominent Alberta lawyer is organizing a delegation to go to Washington, D.C. That's Jeffrey Rath, constitutional lawyer. And he didn't just talk about going to Washington, he actually did it. March 2025, a full delegation of Albertans boarded planes and flew straight to the U.S. Capitol. Not to complain, not to protest, to negotiate. Many Albertans and Western Canadians are expressing frustration and anger, feeling used and left out of the decision-making process. Now, the rumblings of Alberta separation are most certainly on the rise. Alberta is basically treated like a colony of Eastern Canada, and we're sick and tired of it. Send us your oil and gas money and equalization payments and just shut up. That's basically kind of how we feel. Absolutely. And then when we go to Ottawa, protest the way we're treated, well, what we're proposing to do first and foremost is to free Alberta from governance by idiots in Ontario. All right, here's what just happened. Alberta didn't write another complaint letter that gets buried in some Ottawa filing cabinet. They didn't hold another press conference begging for attention. No, they booked tickets, grabbed their briefcases, and flew straight to Washington, D.C., like a province that's completely done taking orders. And honestly, it looks like Alberta finally realized they've been holding all the cards this whole time. They showed up to those meetings with the confidence of someone who knows their value, like someone who's been getting ripped off for years, and finally decided to check what the competition's offering, because make no mistake, this is the loudest exit warning Canada's ever gotten from one of its own provinces. And what did Ottawa think would happen? You can't spend decades siphoning off a province's wealth, killing their projects, strangling their economy with red tape, and then act surprised when they start shopping around, slapping national unity on top of it. That doesn't make it fair, it just makes it easier to justify. Explore the benefits of either Alberta becoming an independent sovereign nation with economic union of the United States, becoming a U.S. territory, or becoming or pursuing full statehood. In April 2025, the Commonwealth of Alberta delegation arrived in Washington. The Alberta Prosperity Project sent their leadership, including CEO Mitch Sylvester, constitutional lawyer Jeffrey Rath, Dr. Dennis Maudry, who founded the University of Alberta Hospital Heart and Lung Transplant Program, and former Conservative MP Rob Anders. This wasn't theater. This was business. Look, the West just hit its breaking point. All that anger you've been hearing about for years, it's not just talk anymore. It's turning into real action, and Alberta's at the front of it. This isn't a province sitting around hoping Ottawa eventually pays attention. They're past that whole phase. People across Alberta, Saskatchewan, even parts of BC, they're not wondering if change can happen anymore. They're building it, setting up networks, collecting signatures, drawing up economic plans, preparing for choices that could actually redraw the map instead of just complaining about the one they're stuck with. And here's what's different. This movement isn't running on emotion or some temporary outrage that'll fade by next season. It's running on something way stronger. Self-awareness, a collective understanding that having economic strength and natural wealth actually means leverage. And leverage that opens doors, real ones. So, but again, let's leave all the grievance aside. I mean, there's lots of them. We don't need to focus on, the degree to which Alberta is a colony of Quebec and Ontario. I think that's just a fact. Read Section 154 of the Supreme Court secession reference. They set out the test for what a colonized people is. Alberta meets the test from the standpoint of being able to unilaterally declare independence from Canada. For years, the West felt completely irrelevant in Canada's power structure, ignored, dismissed, treated like background static. But now those same people aren't complaining anymore. They're speaking with clarity, with purpose, with a plan. You can feel it at the community meetings. You can see it in the rising membership numbers. You can hear it in conversations that used to sound like pipe dreams, but now sound like strategy sessions. Western Canada isn't waiting around for fairness to magically show up. They're building better options. And history tends to remember movements driven by competence, not just anger. Alberta's finished asking permission, they're negotiating terms. We're in a situation now where, let's imagine that Alberta is a completely battered spouse who's been punched in the face repeatedly by an abusive husband, right? And for sake of argument, let's call that abusive husband. Oh, I don't know, Mark Carney. So Alberta didn't just talk about exploring alternatives, they actually went and did it. They got on planes, flew to Washington, and walked into those rooms like a province that's ready to write its own future. A full team showed up. Constitutional experts, economic advisors, energy industry executives, people who know exactly what Alberta brings to the table. And they didn't come down out of curiosity, they came with purpose, taking Alberta's offer straight to decision makers instead of waiting for Ottawa to maybe possibly eventually pass the message along. From where I'm standing, this is the boldest move Alberta's made in decades. This isn't theater, it's not some stunt for the cameras. It's a business proposal between sellers who have what buyers need and potential partners who understand the value of what's on offer. How has Canada lost their way to make you think you got to join? Lost their way? Trudeau and Carney, are all wringing their hands over the tariffs. They're going to be kicking Albertans in the teeth and bringing in a 21% carbon tax increase in April. This is, the carbon tax itself is just an insult to the hardworking Albertans. Behind the scenes, Alberta's delegation scheduled discussions with energy policy boards, legislative advisors, and individuals who genuinely comprehend what Alberta means to a continental marketplace. Petroleum reserves, strategic minerals, logistics networks, capacity. Alberta treated this entire operation like contract negotiations, not confrontation. And that degree of professionalism says everything about where this campaign actually stands. This isn't some wild impulse move. It's deliberate, tactical. What I'm seeing is a province exploring alternative arrangements the way any high-value commodity would discreetly, methodically, with bargaining chips ready and alternatives available. And Washington listened because Alberta arrived bearing actual assets, not just complaints or historical grievances. This has gotten more and more attention in the United States. People from the U.S. have been reaching out to me for my contact information. The thing's taking on a life of its own because I think clearly, on the American side of the border, people, in the United States see the clear benefit of an independent Alberta. In October 2025, the delegation went back. Second trip to Washington. And this time, according to Dr. Dennis Maudry, they got something concrete. Trump administration officials reportedly discussed a $500 million transition loan to help Alberta separate from Canada. They talked about the U.S. agreeing to exchange every Alberta citizen's Canadian dollar for $1 US to prop up Alberta's currency during transition. And the first thing said when they walked into that conference room, "We recognize and support Alberta becoming the sovereign nation for the first time." Right now, Alberta is examining 3 viable directions, and each one is grounded in resource dominance and continental significance. Option 1, complete independence. A sovereign Alberta controlling its own resource regulations, its own monetary system, its own tax code, negotiating international agreements as peers instead of being dictated to as a subordinate province. Option 2, U.S. territory status. A bunch of economists actually consider this the most economically powerful choice. Tariff elimination, integrated market entry, a taxation framework that's significantly lighter than what Canada's currently extracting. Last 10 years for Trudeau, shutting down our pipelines, denying that there's a business case for liquid natural gas to go anywhere in the world because of all the money he's making with his buddies and the Qatari Sovereign Wealth Fund, etc., right? So let's just imagine that, Carney is the abusive spouse. All he has to offer Albertans is a little box of chocolate. And option 3, full American statehood. A position inside the planet's biggest economy. Genuine representation, congressional votes, infrastructure coordination that Canada has consistently refused to deliver. Each pathway carries different political implications, but all 3 share something crucial. Alberta finally possesses negotiating strength instead of just hoping somebody pays attention. For the first time in decades, this province holds multiple futures available, instead of just accepting one. And that shift changes the entire dynamic. Discussion becomes influence. Alberta isn't searching for an escape route. They're comparing upgrade packages. Alberta controls a resource engine capable of completely transforming its economic landscape within years. And independence would place that control directly in provincial hands, without federal limitations, without environmental policies mandated from thousands of miles away. Alberta's energy production could expand exponentially. Southern pipelines could activate. Trade restrictions could vanish. International markets could open immediately. The figures matter here. Increased production means increased income staying local. Tax reductions become realistic when you're retaining your earnings instead of shipping them eastward annually. Can't afford to heat their homes and can't afford diesel and gas for their cars and trucks to go to work. That's a big part of why it is that people in Alberta are fed up with being governed, by idiotic politicians from Quebec and Ontario. For Canada, that situation creates serious problems because Alberta isn't just another territory. Alberta bankrolls the entire fiscal architecture that sustains transfer programs nationwide. When the province that literally powers the economy starts considering alternatives, the framework above it starts crumbling. National budgets, redistribution systems, federal income sources, they all lose their foundation. What I'm witnessing is an inflection point where Alberta's prosperity isn't just success, it becomes power, and power that's worth more than petroleum itself. The financial reality favors whoever commands the resources, and Alberta's approaching full command. We're now up to over 60,000 members, which is more members than the United Conservative Party of Alberta at this point. So if you're wondering whether this campaign is legitimate or just theater, watch the data because data doesn't wave flags. It reshapes countries. The Alberta Prosperity Project launched 4.5 years back with just a small founding group. Today, they're reporting over 60,000 official members. That's larger than the governing United Conservative Party itself. Their petition system contains over 250,000 verified signatures, already exceeding the 177,000 legally mandated to force a referendum under existing provincial legislation. That demonstrates this isn't activism, this is organization, this is infrastructure. The benefits of independence free of, the structural problems caused by Canadian federalism, which has effectively turned Alberta and Albertans into colonized citizens of, into a colony of Quebec and Ontario, which we're all sororely fed up with. And what really catches my attention is the framework supporting all this legal teams developing separation blueprints, financial experts calculating revenue increases freed from transfer obligations, volunteer networks operating like a provincial-scale political machine. Public events are drawing thousands. Fundraising goals are getting crushed within days. Growth metrics resemble a company preparing to go public. The enthusiasm exists absolutely, but the organization is what actually counts. And they've built organization. When popular support, legal mechanisms, and operational structure all converge, that's when historical trajectories start shifting, and Alberta's positioned exactly at that junction. No campaign achieves credibility through passion alone. Progress requires systems. It requires people, funding, documentation, schedules, and Alberta's campaign already possesses those components. Every additional supporter just adds more pressure to a situation that's already tilting towards separation. This is Western Canada in operational mode, calculated, structured, supported by evidence strong enough to destabilize an entire nation. Now, Washington isn't interested because they're curious. They're interested because Alberta arrives with resources that most sovereign nations would envy. Alberta manages the third largest confirmed petroleum reserves globally, over 165 billion barrels. That single fact positions them alongside major oil-producing nations. Factor in over $120 billion yearly in energy sector output, strategic minerals, agricultural production, international market appetite, and suddenly you understand why Alberta presents as an asset, not a request. And the United States sees way beyond just the oil. Yeah, they love energy. That's no secret. But what they're really looking at is a stable supplier sitting right above Montana and North Dakota, a dependable continental source that cuts out any reliance on shaky foreign markets. Experts are predicting Alberta could ramp up production by 50 to 100% inside 5 years with pipelines running straight into American refineries. On the U.S. side, congressional energy committees have already signaled they're open to deeper economic ties because Alberta isn't asking for a handout, they're offering a continental edge. Let's call this what it is: pure geopolitical strategy. Control the energy, control the leverage. Alberta's sitting on all of it: reserves, land, market demand. And Washington gets the advantage of locking that supply inside North American borders instead of watching it get tangled up in international politics. Partnerships form where both sides win, and Alberta's bringing wins measured in billions, in barrels, in strategic ground. The real question was never why Alberta would look to the U.S. The real question is why wouldn't the U.S. want Alberta? And if Alberta actually pulls the trigger, this isn't just symbolic. This is a full-scale economic shockwave. Ottawa pulls in somewhere between $70 and $80 billion a year from Alberta through federal taxes, pension payments, and transfer programs. But Alberta only gets back around $33 to $36 billion in federal spending and infrastructure. The numbers don't lie. Rip Alberta out of that equation and you've got a $40 billion hole in federal revenue every single year. Economists are warning that could wreck national programs from one coast to the other. Meanwhile, Alberta gets something Ottawa never gave them: total control over the world's third largest oil reserves, over 165 billion barrels. Energy analysts say production could double in 4 to 5 years without federal roadblocks, especially with American buyers already signaling interest in long-term continental energy deals. 5 southern pipeline routes are sitting ready for approval. One's even designed to connect straight through to Pacific ports via Washington state. This wouldn't just boost Alberta, it would rewire North American energy power. An independent province could shoot into the top 5 global oil exporters with per capita GDP projected to blow past Singapore, Norway, and Switzerland. For Alberta, independence isn't about protest, it's about economic freedom. One province takes back control. One federal system starts crumbling and power shifts from Ottawa's government chambers straight to Alberta's oil fields. So here's where we are. The delegation's been to Washington twice. Trump administration officials have expressed support. A $500 million loan's been discussed. Over 60,000 members. Over 250,000 petition signatures already collected. Bill 54 lowered the threshold to 177,000. They've already blown past it. The referendum question is approved. The legal path is clear. And Ottawa? They're watching their entire fiscal foundation prepare to walk out the door. Alberta's not asking anymore. They're negotiating. And Washington's listening. The only question left is the one everyone's whispering. Do they actually do it this time?